They were wives, girlfriends, mistresses, mothers, and sometimes they didn't even know what role they were playing until the final act. From apartments in Chelsea to cafes in Harlem, from wedding rings to burner phones, we followed 10 women as they uncovered the truth. Some walked out, some stayed, some rewrote the ending. 10 true affair stories from New York. Wasn't about the lies they were told. It was about what they did once they stopped believing them. Because in this city, betrayal doesn't always knock. Sometimes it hands you a receipt.
He told her the hotel was for a work conference. A one-night stay. Just logistics. But when Jasmine opened the emailed receipt, she didn't just see the room number. She saw the same room. Booked twice. Same week. Same floor. Different guest. One reservation was under his name. The other wasn't. Jasmine from Brooklyn, he booked the same hotel room twice. Series, 10 True Affair Stories from New York. The email came in at 10:43 a.m., just as Jasmine was finishing her second cup of coffee and flipping through invoices at her desk. Subject, Forward Andorra Midtown Confirmation. There was no message attached. Just the forwarded booking confirmation, neatly automated. She clicked it without thinking. Her husband, Carter, often sent her things without context: reminders, tickets, shared schedules. But this wasn't for her. She knew that as soon as she saw the header. Thank you for booking your stay at Andorra Midtown. Room type, Executive King Suite check-in, Tuesday 6 p.m. checkout, Thursday 11 a.m. guest name, Carter Holmes. Her eyes flicked down. She schemed. Not because she was suspicious, but because something inside her, something quiet, tugged gently on her attention. She opened her calendar. Carter had said he'd be home both nights. He'd mentioned a work dinner, sure, but hadn't said anything about staying overnight. Let alone two. Jasmine sat back. Something didn't add up. But not enough to accuse. Not yet. So she searched her inbox for the hotel name. And there it was. 3 days earlier, another booking confirmation. Different sender. Different guest name. Same hotel. Same room number. Same check-in time. Her stomach did something strange, not dropped, not twisted. It hovered. Like her body was waiting for her brain to catch up. She read the older email again. Guest name, Mara Linwood. She didn't know Amara. Carter had never mentioned the name. But the reservation was made using his secondary credit card. Jasmine's fingertips tingled. She minimized the window, opened the Notes app on her phone, and began copying down details. Room number. Dates. Confirmation codes. Her handwriting was calm. Steady. Inside, she was not. Because this wasn't just suspicion. This was math. This was data. And she had always been good with numbers. She leaned back in her chair, letting the light from her office window fall across her face. The hum of the printer. The ticking of the wall clock. Ordinary sounds in an ordinary day. And yet, nothing about this moment felt ordinary. Carter was not the kind of man who made mistakes with logistics. If anything, he was obsessed with precision. Calendars. Alerts. Coordinated details. The idea that he would accidentally book the same hotel room twice, under two names, in the same week? No. Not him. Not this way. That's what chilled her most. Not the idea that he might be cheating, but the possibility that he thought she wouldn't notice. That her time, her attention, her intelligence were all things he could bypass with a clean shirt and a half kiss at the door. She stared at her screen a moment longer. Then pressed Command+P. The printer warmed. Clicked. Spat out the page. She folded it once. Slipped it into her bag. And returned to her invoices, as if her life hadn't just bent at the corners. There would be time to cry later. If she decided it was worth it. The cab smelled like rain and old leather. Jasmine sat in the back, her fingers laced together in her lap, nails pressing into skin harder than she realized. She told the driver, calmly, "Andorra Midtown, please." He nodded, pulled into traffic, and turned up the jazz station just enough to fill the space between them. Outside, the streets gleamed wet from a light drizzle that had started just after lunch. The city looked reflective, like it was thinking too. Jasmine watched buildings blur past the window. She wasn't rehearsing what to say. She wasn't sure she'd say anything at all. She told herself this was just to confirm. To stand in front of something physical. Something undeniable. The hotel appeared slowly, like a secret emerging from behind steel and fog. She paid the fare, stepped out onto the slick sidewalk, and adjusted her coat. The doorman opened the glass door without question. The lobby was too quiet. Too beige. Too curated. A soundtrack of soft piano drifted through the air, the kind of music meant to make expensive places feel neutral. She walked to the desk, heart steady but cold. The woman behind the counter smiled. "Welcome to the Andorra. How can I help you?" "Hi," Jasmine said, sliding her hand into her bag as if searching for something she'd rehearsed losing. "My husband, Carter Holmes, stayed here earlier this week. I'm here to drop off something he forgot." The receptionist nodded politely. "Of course. Would you like me to send it to the room?" "No, he's not staying now. But I was wondering." She kept her voice light, casual, as if the answer mattered less than the tone. "Wasn't there someone else listed under the same room this week?" "Different name, same room." The receptionist froze for a split second. It was enough. She turned to the monitor. Tapped quietly. Looked at Jasmine. And then nodded, slow and awkward. Yes, there was. Jasmine smiled. Almost sweetly. "Thanks. That's all I needed." She turned and walked out, her heels soft against the marble. The doorman opened the door again, not knowing she'd left with far more than she brought in. Outside, the drizzle had returned. Thin needles of rain that blurred the world but didn't quite hide it. She crossed the street. Stopped on the far sidewalk. And stared at the building. It looked clean. polished. Like something to be proud of. Like something someone would lie to protect. She pulled her coat tighter, let the rain settle on her lashes. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She just stood there. And for the first time all day, she allowed herself to feel the one thing she'd been resisting. Clarity. Not anger. Not grief. Just the sharp, unmistakable coldness of being right. And knowing he'd never think she'd figure it out. But she had. Without a fight. Without a word. And sometimes, that was louder than anything she could have screamed. Back home, Jasmine sat in front of her laptop with a mug of untouched tea, the steam already gone. Her coat was still on. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard like she was waiting for something to stop her. Nothing did. She opened the guest confirmation again, the one with the unfamiliar name. Mara Linwood. The email address was partially visible in the confirmation footer. Not a personal Gmail. It was from Carter's firm. A corporate domain. That alone tightened something in her chest. She copied the address. Opened a browser. Began typing without thinking. LinkedIn first. Mara Linwood. Business development. Transferred from Boston office 3 months ago. The timing fit. Jasmine remembered Carter mentioning a new hire from out east back in February. He'd said it like it was nothing. Like a footnote. Asterisked with irrelevance. Now she wondered if it had always been underlined. Instagram was next. Mara's profile wasn't private. Carefully curated, like most young professionals trying to blend lifestyle and ambition. Brunches. Rooftop views. Polished smiles. Then one photo stopped her. A hotel bed. 2 glasses of wine. His hand visible at the edge of the frame. The caption read, "Not all meetings are boring." Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't zoom in. She didn't click away. She just stared. At the smugness. The secrecy. The comfort. It wasn't betrayal that stung. It was the ease of it. The familiarity in the way Mara had angled her body toward the camera. The half-buttoned shirt draped over the chair in the background. The subtle confidence of someone who believed no one else was watching. Jasmine wasn't heartbroken. She was humiliated. Not because he loved someone else, but because he'd placed her in the role of a placeholder. The wife for the weekends. The woman who knew the Wi-Fi password but not the itinerary. She closed the tab. Her hands remained still on the keyboard. Not trembling. Just heavy. Like she was carrying the weight of every moment she hadn't noticed, every late text, every vague answer, every casual lie wrapped in charm. She sat there for a long time. Until the tea went cold. Until the screen dimmed. Until she stopped looking for a reason. And started accepting the one already in front of her. The apartment was quiet in the way only apartments in New York can be, surrounded by noise but perfectly still inside. Jasmine stood at the kitchen counter, her laptop open, screen glowing in the soft amber light of a single hanging bulb. She didn't cry. She didn't pour wine. There were no playlists. No calls to friends. Just the soft click of keys and the quiet breath she held between each one. She opened the shared travel folder on their cloud drive. It was still labeled us. Inside, she found 3 upcoming itineraries: Boston, Charleston, San Diego. She opened each one, checked the reservation numbers, and copied them over to the airline portals. Cancel. Confirm. Move to trash. Then the hotel bookings. The same. Click. Confirm. Gone. Each action felt like vacuuming a space she didn't know had gathered dust. Not rage. Not revenge. Just cleaning. Then came the final step. She opened the email draft. Typed slowly. Subject: reservation cancellation request to front desk at andaramidtown.com. Hi, please cancel both reservations under Carter Homes this week. Neither of us will be staying there. Thank you. Jasmine Homes. She reread it once. Not because she doubted it, but because she liked how finished it felt. She hit send. The email slipped into the outbox like a final breath. She stood in the stillness a few moments longer. No tears. No heartbeat racing. Just a strange, weightless quiet in her chest. Like the moment after a storm leaves but before the air remembers how to move again. Jasmine reached up, twisted her wedding ring once, then again. It didn't feel heavy. It felt irrelevant. She slid it off. It left a faint indentation. Pale skin that hadn't seen light in years. She set it on the countertop. No ceremony. Just placement. Next to the fruit bowl. Next to her silence. Carter was still out of town. Still smiling, probably. Still thinking he was winning. She didn't text him. She didn't call. She didn't plan a confrontation. Because there was nothing left to say to someone who hadn't asked a question in months. Let him come home to the quiet. Let him search for the things he thought he'd hidden. Let him realize the loss not when she left, but when he noticed he was no longer being watched. No longer being waited for. No longer being believed. The screen dimmed. The fridge hummed. The city outside moved without pause. And Jasmine sat down, alone in the quiet she had finally chosen for herself. Some women leave with suitcases. Others leave with silence. And a cancelled reservation. But in our next story, a woman from Queens doesn't get a phone call. Or a receipt. Or a second chance. She gets a notification. From a ride-share app. At 2 a.m. A ride. That wasn't for her. Stay with us for the next chapter in 10 True Affair Stories from New York. Because sometimes, betrayal doesn't knock. It arrives curbside. She didn't snoop. She didn't ask. She just got a notification. A ride. Booked from her home. At 2 a.m. But she wasn't going anywhere. No confrontation. No shouting. Just one woman. And one app. Telling the truth no one expected. Brianna from Queens, the 2 a.m. ride-share wasn't for her. Series, 10 True Affair Stories from New York. The keys fell with a soft clink onto the entryway table. Brianna stood in the silence of her Queens apartment, the air stale from being shut all day. She kicked off her shoes with one tired motion, the rubber soles thudding dully against the wall. Her scrubs still clung to her, carrying the scent of antiseptic and something metallic, maybe blood, maybe just exhaustion. The digital clock on the microwave blinked 1:48 a.m. She let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. 12 hours on the floor. 3 traumas, 2 codes. 1 patient she couldn't save. Her shoulders sagged under invisible weight as she moved toward the kitchen, opening the fridge without purpose. She stared at the same half-empty bottle of almond milk, the container of takeout rice she wasn't going to eat. Then, the chime. Her phone lit up on the counter. A notification. Your ride is arriving now. Her brow furrowed. She hadn't ordered a ride. She picked up the phone, expecting an error, maybe a glitch. But the name was there, clear and bold under the rideshare app logo, Malcolm. Her husband. The pickup location? Their address. She blinked. Maybe he mistyped her address instead of his hotel. He was supposed to be in Albany for a conference. Left 3 days ago. She hadn't heard much, just a good night text, a generic long day reply when she asked how it was going. She told herself it was just work. But the app showed otherwise. The dot on the screen pulsed like a heartbeat. A driver named Jorge was 3 minutes away. She stared at the phone. Not hers. Not her ride. But from here. The light above the stove cast a low, warm glow. Everything in the apartment felt too quiet, like the walls had drawn breath and were waiting with her. A creak in the hallway. Her own breathing. The distant buzz of traffic below. The details sharpened, as if her mind had turned up the volume on reality. The notification shifted. Rider en route to Casella Boutique Hotel. She didn't move. It was a name she knew. She passed it on her way to work sometimes. Chic, upscale. A place for champagne and secrets. Rooms by the hour, by the intention. The pulse in her throat ticked faster. Still, she didn't speak. Didn't scream. The instinct to call him Malcolm flared and vanished just as quickly. She already knew. Instead, she sat down. Carefully. As if any sudden motion might shatter her. She placed the phone in front of her on the kitchen table. Her hands trembled slightly, but her face remained still. She watched the screen as the car approached its destination. 1 block away. At hotel entrance. Ride complete. She didn't cry. The emotion wasn't tears. It was something deeper. A kind of cold blooming inside her chest. Not like the sharp stab of betrayal you see in movies. No screaming violins. Just silence, pressing in. She reached for the kettle, filled it slowly. The sound of the water hitting metal was louder than it should have been. She boiled it. Poured it into a chipped mug. Herbal tea, something meant to soothe. Her fingers wrapped around the warmth like it was the only real thing left. What did it mean, exactly? Could she still lie to herself? That Malcolm was meeting someone for business? That he needed a quiet place to think? But rides at 2 a.m. from their shared home didn't leave space for negotiation. Especially when he used her account. Used her trust. Used her silence. She sipped the tea. It tasted like nothing. The room didn't change, but something inside her did. She stood and walked to the living room. Picked up a throw blanket. Draped it around her shoulders. She didn't turn on the TV. Didn't scroll. She just sat, the phone screen still glowing dimly from the counter, like it was waiting for her to react. But she wouldn't. Not yet. There were no sirens in her mind. No chaos. Just a slow, methodical alignment of facts and timelines and decisions. A betrayal that had probably started before tonight. But it didn't matter when. It mattered that it had arrived now quietly, digitally, like everything else in their life lately. No voice. No face. Just proof. Proof that Malcolm was here. And going somewhere he shouldn't be. And he didn't think she'd notice. But she had. And that changed everything. The tea had gone cold. Brianna didn't notice until her fingers, once clutching the mug like a lifeline, felt the chill seep through. She set it down and turned to her phone. The ride-share app was still open, the completed trip mocking her in silence. Her thumb hovered, then tapped into the account history. Past trips. Dozens of them. Some hers work rides, quick errands, but others stood out. Late night pickups. From their home. Drop-offs at locations she didn't recognize. A string of destinations that formed no logical pattern. One in Hell's Kitchen. Another in Greenpoint. A few even across the river in Jersey City. But it was the most recent one last Friday that stopped her breath. Drop off, 10 Grove Court. It didn't sound familiar. She copied the address into maps. The pin landed in a quiet block known for discretion. Brianna had passed by once, heard the whispers from co-workers who joked that it was where married men went to forget their rings. A boutique townhouse. No sign. No front desk. Only a keypad entry and blinds that stayed closed. She stared at the screen. Malcolm had been home that night. Or so she thought. He'd told her he was working late. She remembered texting him around 9 p.m., asking if he wanted her to wait for dinner. He replied an hour later, "Don't wait up. Grab something for yourself." She had. And she had eaten alone, in the glow of their living room TV, with reruns and silence. Her hand tightened around the phone. More rides. More lies. The dates started forming a pattern. Thursdays. Some Saturdays. Occasionally Tuesdays. Each trip had been made under her account using her trust as currency. Her thoughts became a slow storm. Not furious. Just methodical. She clicked each ride. Each timestamp. Each address. She imagined him sitting beside another woman. Laughing in the back seat. Reaching for someone who wasn't her. Kissing someone who didn't know how he snored or how he panicked when he lost his keys or that he always left the toothpaste cap off. It wasn't just cheating. It was intimacy stolen from her, regifted to someone who hadn't earned it. And worse, she had helped him do it. Unwittingly, yes. But her account, her phone, her silence, her stomach turned. Brianna remembered how she used to defend him. When friends raised eyebrows. When her sister hinted he might not be as solid as he seemed. Brianna had smiled, said they were just tired, just busy. That Malcolm was private, not secretive. That love didn't need a parade. Now, all those memories tasted like metal. The app blinked, still open. She scrolled back to the earliest unfamiliar trip. Almost 2 months ago. A Wednesday. Pick up, home. Drop off, Barrow and 7th. A restaurant. A cozy one. She remembered recommending it. The betrayal wasn't just in the bodies. It was in the map of their life together used as a guide to deceive her. She pressed the side button. Locked the screen. Laid the phone face down. Her hands stayed clenched in her lap. How had she missed it? Because she wanted to. Because believing in him was easier than questioning everything. Because love, when it's loyal, grows blind in the dark. And because she'd trusted him with the softest parts of her. She let out a sound. Not quite a sob. More like an exhale cut short by grief. For a while, she just sat. Not moving. Not thinking. Just absorbing. Then, slowly, she stood. Walked to the bathroom. Washed her face. Cold water. No soap. Just something to bring her back. She caught her own eyes in the mirror. Red-rimmed, but steady. And behind them, something was shifting. Not rage. Not yet. But clarity. The kind that only comes after everything you believed has quietly collapsed. She turned off the light and walked back into the stillness of the living room. Not as the same woman who entered it an hour ago. But as someone who now knew, this wasn't a mistake. Wasn't a slip. It was a pattern. And she had just followed the trail. The coffee machine hissed quietly in the early morning light. Steam curled upward in lazy spirals, dissipating into the silence of the kitchen. Brianna stood barefoot, wrapped in an oversized cardigan, eyes fixed on the slow drip into her mug. Her movements were measured. Calm. As if she were alone. She wasn't. The front door clicked open at exactly 7:32 a.m. Malcolm stepped inside. No suitcase. No overnight bag. Just his phone in one hand and keys in the other. His shirt was wrinkled. His collar crushed. His hair damp not from a shower, but from the morning air or a rushed rinse somewhere else. A faint scent trailed him into the room, something floral, expensive, unfamiliar. He paused when he saw her. "Hey," he said, with a half smile that tried too hard. "Didn't expect you to be up." Brianna turned slightly toward him, her expression unreadable. "Coffee," she replied simply, and turned back to pour a cup. The mug she handed him wasn't warm with welcome. Just hot with liquid. Her eyes didn't meet his. Malcolm lingered by the counter, shifting slightly. "Listen, the trip got messed up. They cancelled last minute. Something about the venue. I stayed with Greg. You remember Greg, from the old job?" She nodded. Didn't have time to text. We were talking late. Crashed on his couch. Another nod. He took a sip, then set the mug down. You mad? She shook her head. A beat of silence passed. Then 2. Then 5. Malcolm cleared his throat, walking around the island toward the living room. He stopped. The phone sat on the coffee table. Its screen was on. Displayed clearly was the ride-share history. A trip from their address. At 2:08 a.m. To Casella Boutique Hotel. He froze. The smile faded. He didn't reach for the phone. Didn't sit down. Brianna's voice, quiet but steady, came from behind him. You used my account. He turned. Bree, I dash. She raised a hand. Not to accuse. Just to stop the sound. You didn't think I'd see it? But you used my name. My data. You didn't even bother to cover your tracks. His lips parted, but no words came out. I made you coffee, she said, gesturing to the counter. Because you looked tired. Still no response. Were you going to lie again? Or just let me keep pretending? Malcolm ran a hand over his face, then through his damp hair. It's not what you think. I didn't plan for this to happen. Her laugh was soft. Dry. Almost gentle. I didn't plan to find out. But here we are. She sat on the edge of the couch, legs crossed, calm as if discussing the weather. How many times? He hesitated. It was complicated. She tilted her head. That's not a number. He looked down. Brianna leaned back slightly. Her face still held no fire. Only the chill of distance. A distance built not from rage but from retreat. She had gone somewhere inside herself where he could no longer reach. I should have told you, he murmured. You shouldn't have needed to. The silence stretched again. It was no longer a pause, it was a decision. She stood. Walked to the table. Picked up the phone and handed it to him. You can delete the app. He looked at her, confused. She met his gaze for the first time. You won't be needing it anymore. He blinked. Bree, what are you saying? I'm saying I saw the ride. I watched it on the screen, Malcolm. I watched you leave. And then I watched you arrive. He stepped forward. She didn't flinch. I messed up, he said, his voice cracking now. But we can talk about this. We can work through it. Brianna shook her head slowly. There is no we left in this part. She turned away, not out of drama, but because there was nothing left to say. The man behind her didn't shout. Didn't beg. He just stood still, holding the phone that had betrayed him as much as he had betrayed her. She walked to the bedroom, closed the door behind her. The soft click wasn't angry. It was final. In the kitchen, 2 mugs of coffee sat untouched. Steam no longer rising. The silence returned, not hollow, but clean. Brianna lay on the bed, not crying. Just staring at the ceiling, her breath even. She didn't win. This wasn't a victory. It was survival. And silence had done the work. She didn't need to scream. She had let the truth speak for itself. Brianna woke before her alarm. The light in the room was gray and soft, the kind that comes just before sunrise. She lay still for a moment, listening to the hush of early morning. In the stillness, she felt no panic. No grief. Just quiet. She got up, showered, and packed without sound. She chose her clothes carefully: comfortable jeans, a navy sweater, sneakers that had taken her through years of hospital shifts. She folded what she needed, a week's worth of clothes, 2 cardigans, the photograph of her parents on their wedding day. She placed it in a padded envelope, like something fragile. The last thing she packed was a worn towel lined with cat fur. Her tabby, Salem, meowed once as she lifted him gently into the crate. She left the bedroom as it was. She didn't make the bed. Didn't write a note on the pillow. Not that kind of woman. Not anymore. Instead, she walked to the kitchen and opened her email. Subject line: requesting emergency leave, personal. She typed simply, I need to step away for a few days. I will be reachable in case of emergencies. Thank you for understanding. Then she hit send. She had found the rental online at 2 a.m., while lying awake beside a man she would never understand again. The place was close to the hospital, small, sunlit, and temporary. A corner studio with a wide window and a kitchen that fit only one person. Perfect. At 8:12 a.m., she closed the front door behind her. It was the last time. No goodbye. No slam. Just a door. Softly locked. She left no explanations. Only a single envelope on the table. Inside, a folded sheet of paper with 6 lines of ink. The truth didn't need to be shouted. It was waiting for you. In the back seat of a car you never thought I'd see. You left the door open. I just chose to walk through it. By 9 a.m., she had settled into the new apartment. Salem curled against the window. The sun, reluctant but present, warmed the sill. Brianna sat cross-legged on the floor, unpacking slowly. Every motion was quiet, deliberate, like resetting a life. She didn't check her phone. She didn't open social media. The world could wait. She boiled water and made tea, this time finishing it while it was still hot. Her mind didn't race. It wandered. Not to Malcolm. Not to what he might be thinking. But to the parts of herself she'd put away too long. The woman who used to paint. Who once wanted to go to Italy. Who used to run just to feel her lungs stretch. It wasn't just a breakup. It was a resurrection. She had been shrinking herself for so long. Making space. Smoothing edges. Making peace with excuses. With gaslighting wrapped in charm. With absence explained by stress. Now, there was no need. No one to make smaller for. The silence in the apartment wasn't lonely. It was honest. It breathed with her. Around noon, she walked to the corner market. Bought groceries. A bunch of tulips. A lemon. A box of Salem's favorite treats. She greeted the cashier with a smile that felt new on her face. Not forced. Not polite. Just hers. In the afternoon, she wrote in her journal. Not about what had happened but about what she hadn't let herself want for years. She wrote the word freedom 5 times. Each one softer. Each one louder. By the time evening fell, she had lit a candle by the bed and placed her parents' photo on the desk. She looked at their faces for a long time. They had stayed together through so much. But they also never lied. Never made each other feel invisible. That was the part she admired most. She didn't cry that night. She didn't need to. She had already shed the weight. Outside, the city buzzed like it always did. But inside the small apartment, everything was still. And for the first time in a long time so was she. Some women leave a letter. Some just leave. But our next woman? She never even got the chance. She was 8 months pregnant. Waiting in a waiting room. For a man who never walked in. Instead, she got a bill. Not for flowers. Not for diapers. For a dinner. For 2. At a rooftop bar in Soho. Stay with us for the next chapter in 10 True Affair Stories from New York. Because sometimes, love doesn't fade. It disappears receipt by receipt. She didn't scream. She didn't spy. She didn't even ask where he was. She just waited. In a white room. With a heartbeat monitor. And a name on the door that said mother. But he never came. And the only thing that showed up was a bank notification. For dinner. For 2. On a rooftop. While she waited for 1. Alina from Soho, the bill wasn't meant for her. Series, 10 True Affair Stories from New York. The waiting room was quiet except for the soft buzz of fluorescent lights and the occasional rustle of paper. Alina sat near the window, her hands resting protectively on her round belly. The chair beneath her was stiff, but she didn't shift. She had chosen the seat closest to the hallway where the doctor would call her name and where Julian would most likely appear, late but apologetic, with that crooked smile that always softened her anger. He had said he'd be there. "Don't go in without me," he texted that morning. "I want to hear the heartbeat. Promise." She had smiled when she read it. It was the 8th month, and every little sign of involvement felt like an anchor. She needed him to want this as much as she did. But now it was 2:41 p.m., and her appointment had been at 2 o'clock. She checked her phone again. No new messages. She typed and erased a dozen different versions of "Are you close?" before locking the screen and slipping it back into her bag. Maybe traffic. Maybe work. Maybe a train delay. Queens to Midtown could be unpredictable. A nurse passed, offering a sympathetic smile. Alina nodded, smiling back faintly. She tried to appear relaxed. To seem like the woman who understood. Who wasn't worried. Who had control. The baby kicked gently. She rubbed her belly and whispered, "We're okay, sweet pea. We're just waiting." Another 5 minutes passed. The receptionist called her name, and she rose slowly, steadying herself. She paused at the hallway entrance, turning one last time toward the door. No Julian. Inside the exam room, Everything was white and warm. The doctor was kind, gentle with her words and hands. They talked about fluid levels, blood pressure, positioning. The machine hummed as it traced the shape of life inside her. The sound came like a steady little horse galloping through water. A heartbeat. Fast, strong. Alina smiled and swallowed down a tear. Julian had missed it? The doctor asked, "Is Dad running late?" Alina nodded. Probably just caught up at work. He wanted to be here. Wanted. Past tense. She dressed quietly after, moving slower than usual. Her body felt heavy, but not from the pregnancy. It was something else. A weight that sat just behind her chest. She reached the front desk. Pulled out her wallet. Then her phone buzzed. Not Julian. A notification from the bank. Your card was just charged, $278, the observatory rooftop, Soho. She froze. The receptionist was saying something, but the words floated past her. She stared at the message again. Her card. The shared one. That restaurant. She knew it. Julian had taken her there once, years ago, for their first anniversary. A rooftop bar with string lights and tiny desserts that looked like they belonged in jewelry boxes. She blinked. $278. At 2:39 p.m. Exactly when she was lying on the exam table, hearing their child's heartbeat alone. She forced a polite smile and handed over her card to pay the clinic fee, hands trembling just slightly. The receptionist didn't notice. Or pretended not to. Outside, the sky had turned gray. Not raining, just heavy. Alina sat on the clinic steps, phone in hand. She didn't call. She didn't text. She just stared at the message. Maybe it was a client. A work lunch. Maybe it was for her. A surprise. Something he would explain. But her heart had already drawn the line between doubt and knowing. And the line had been crossed. She closed her eyes. Took a deep breath. The baby fluttered inside her again, as if sensing her tension. "We're okay," she whispered again, but this time it was more for herself. She didn't want to cry. Crying made things feel real. And if it became real, it would become permanent. So she didn't cry. She stood up. She walked slowly to the subway. Not toward home just yet, but toward a cafe she used to go to when she was single. A place where they remembered her name. Where she could sit and think and be no one's partner, just a woman with a baby on the way, holding her breath between heartbeats and notifications. The world hadn't collapsed. But something inside her had cracked. Quietly. Cleanly. And in that silence, a decision was starting to take shape. The apartment was quiet when Alina returned. Julian wasn't home yet. His absence didn't feel unusual. He often worked late or said he did, but tonight, it cast a different kind of shadow. She placed her keys on the kitchen counter and stood still for a moment, her fingers brushing the phone screen in her coat pocket. She didn't sit. Didn't kick off her shoes. She walked directly to the couch and sank down slowly, pulling out her phone. She opened the banking app. The transaction stared back at her, $278, the observatory rooftop, Soho. She tapped it. The receipt opened. 2 entrees. A shared appetizer. A bottle of Pinot Noir. 20% gratuity added. Dinner. Not drinks. Not a meeting. A full-course meal meant for 2. Alina stared at the itemized breakdown. She could see it in her mind, each plate arriving under golden string lights, wine being poured, silverware clinking lightly on ceramic. The hum of music. The shared glances. The small, romantic theater of dining in Soho. The same place Julian had taken her years ago, when they had just started dating. The place where he told her she made him believe in something again. Where he touched her hand across the table and said he could see forever. Now he was there again. But not with her. Her pulse thudded behind her ears. She opened Instagram. Not his, he never posted. But the restaurant's page was tagged often. It only took a few minutes of scrolling through the tagged stories. She slowed when she saw one from the exact hour of the charge. A blurry story video. Taken by someone sitting a few tables over. Champagne. A view of the city. And just for a flicker 2 people in the background. 1 man. 1 woman. The man's profile was tilted, mid-laugh. But even blurred, she knew that jawline. That collar. That white shirt with the faint blue stripes. He had worn it on Sunday. Across from him, a woman's hand lifted a wine glass into frame. Red nails. Silver rings. Polished. Confident. Not Alina. She paused the video. Her reflection stared back at her from the darkened screen. Her face was calm. Too calm. Her chest ached, not from rage, but from the absence of it. As if her body had gone into some kind of emergency shutdown, preserving what it could. She set the phone down on the coffee table. She didn't cry. She picked it back up. Rewatched the story. Once. Twice. She wasn't torturing herself. She was collecting facts. Turning over each detail like evidence in a case she didn't need a jury for. He had chosen this. Not once, in a moment of weakness. But now. Today. While she was on an exam table listening to their daughter's heartbeat. She looked down at her stomach. Her hands curved around it instinctively. A flutter passed beneath her palms. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Not to Julian. To the life inside her. She stood and walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, drank it slowly. Her mind ran through possibilities. Explanations he might give. Excuses he might try. None of them mattered now. She walked to the bedroom. Turned on the light. Picked up a notebook from the nightstand. It had once been a list of baby names. Favorite middle names. Now she turned to a blank page and wrote in small, even script. Change account passwords. Contact OBGYN about alternate emergency contact. Start looking for short-term rentals near hospital. Separate laundry. Pack essentials. The baby kicked again. She rubbed her belly, more firm this time. Steady. Her life hadn't broken apart. It had been cracked already. She had just refused to see the fault lines. Now, under a blur of red nail polish and wine glasses, she saw them clearly. And once you see clearly, you don't go back to squinting. She sat in bed that night, lights off, screen dark, the city breathing through the windows. Julian still hadn't returned. And Alina wasn't waiting. The key turned in the lock at 11:47 p.m. Alina heard it from the bedroom, where she sat propped against the headboard with a book open in her lap. She wasn't reading. Her eyes had passed over the same sentence 4 times, unmoved. The light on her nightstand spilled a soft pool across the sheets, making the room feel warmer than it was. The door opened. Closed again. Footsteps. Slower than usual. Julian appeared at the doorway, his silhouette briefly framed by the hall light behind him. His shirt was wrinkled, untucked on one side. His tie hung around his neck like an afterthought. His hair was a little damp, as though he had rinsed it quickly, hoping to rinse something else away too. And the scent wine and something floral. Too sweet to be hers. "Hey," he said, his voice a notch too soft, the kind reserved for delicate situations. "You're still up?" Alina looked up from the book, marked her place without a word, and set it aside. Julian leaned against the door frame. "Long day. Sorry I didn't text. Everything got backed up." She nodded once. He walked in, loosened the knot of his tie. "I'm wiped. Just want to crash." She didn't say anything. She didn't move, didn't challenge, didn't accuse. She simply looked at him. Calmly. Quietly. As if she were listening to music only she could hear. He hesitated, searching her face for something: anger, disappointment, fear, but found none. "I'm sorry," he added. "Today was a lot." She nodded again. This time slower. Then she placed her hands on her belly. It was a gesture more natural now than breathing. The baby responded with a roll beneath her skin. Julian looked at her for a moment longer, then turned toward the bathroom. The door clicked shut. The shower turned on. Alina stayed where she was. She stared at the wall, at the faint cracks in the paint, at the shadows the lamplight made on the corners of the room. Her heart didn't race. Her stomach didn't churn. The worst of the storm had already passed. What remained was stillness so complete it frightened her. She reached for her notebook again. She opened to a new page and began to write. Pack birth bag by end of week. Contact doula again about updated schedule. Leave copy of birth plan with front desk at new apartment. Purchase infant car seat. Change pediatrician to one closer to rental. Julian returned a while later, hair wet, wearing an old t-shirt and sweatpants. He looked younger, maybe even remorseful. He climbed into bed next to her. She didn't turn away. But she didn't turn toward him either. He lay on his side, watching the ceiling. "I missed the appointment," he said quietly. "I really did want to be there." She didn't answer. Only placed the notebook on the nightstand and turned off the lamp. The room went dark. He shifted slightly, unsure if he should try again. but she had already closed her eyes. The silence was not cold. It was not cruel. It was complete. And in its completeness, she began to unhook the threads that had tied her to this version of life. Not violently. Not bitterly. Just slowly, with the care of someone undoing a braid they once loved. Julian's breath steadied beside her. He was already slipping away, into dreams or excuses or blank spaces. She listened until it softened. Then she opened her eyes. She stared at the ceiling for a long time. In the quiet, she whispered to herself not a question, not a cry. Just one sentence. It won't be like this when she arrives. Then she rolled to her side, hand on her belly, and let sleep take her. Not because she was at peace, but because she had a plan. And she would need the strength to carry it through. 1 week later, the apartment was nearly empty. Alina stood in the hallway, her hand resting on the last box she'd packed. It held the ultrasound pictures, a framed photo of her and her sister from childhood, and a small stuffed elephant she had bought on impulse during her second trimester. The kind of toy a child might cling to in quiet moments. It was soft, gray, and stitched with quiet hope. The movers had come earlier that day, taking the furniture she wanted to keep: her reading chair, the bassinet, her favorite lamp. She had left the rest. She didn't need much. Not anymore. The new apartment was a 15-minute walk from the hospital. Small. Clean. Temporary. But it had large windows and morning light. That was enough. It was hers. She moved like someone rehearsing something sacred. Her steps were slow, not from hesitation, but from care. Every motion a soft farewell. Julian wasn't home. She didn't wait for him. She placed the last box near the door, zipped her hospital bag, and set it beside it. Then she sat down at the kitchen counter with her laptop and opened a new email. No greeting. No explanation. Just the truth. I waited. For an ultrasound. You showed up on a receipt. You left us before she arrived. Her last name will be mine. Not yours. She read it once. Didn't change a word. She hit send. Then she closed the laptop and stood. She didn't cry. Not when she walked through the apartment one last time. Not when she opened the door and felt the cooler spring air on her skin. Not even when she stepped onto the sidewalk with her belly full of life and no one walking beside her. She had done all her grieving in silence. Now, she was just moving forward. The cab pulled up. She waved. The driver loaded her things without question. Alina slid into the back seat, placed a hand on her stomach, and exhaled slowly. The building behind her grew smaller in the rearview mirror. She didn't look back. At the new apartment, she unpacked what she could. Hung the baby's clothes in the tiny closet. Stuck the ultrasound photos on the fridge with mismatched magnets. She lit a candle. It smelled like vanilla and cardamom. It wasn't a celebration. But it was a beginning. That night, she curled into bed with the window crack slightly open. The city outside continued without pause, loud and indifferent. But in her small corner of it, there was quiet. Not empty. Just her and the child inside her, who had already survived more than most. She whispered to her belly, "You're safe. We're okay." Then she closed her eyes. No drama. No grand ending. Just the sound of her own breathing. And the peace of finally choosing herself. Some women walk away in silence. Others with a suitcase. Alina left with a child. And no one to say goodbye to. But in our next story, a woman from Brooklyn didn't leave at all. Because she never knew she was the other woman. Not until the wife showed up. At her job. With a smile. And a cup of coffee. Laced with a secret she'd never forget. Stay tuned for the next chapter in 10 True Affair Stories from New York. Because in Brooklyn, sometimes the confrontation isn't loud. It's brewed, and served. She didn't know he was married. She didn't ask. She just poured his coffee. Every morning. Smiling. Trusting. But someone else knew. And she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just walked in one day. With a smile of her own. And a cappuccino. That tasted like revenge. Naomi from Brooklyn, the coffee wasn't just bitter. Series, 10 True Affair Stories from New York. The coffee shop on Greenpoint Avenue came alive just before 6:30 a.m. Naomi was always there 15 minutes earlier, apron tied, hair pinned, hands already warm from prepping the espresso machine. It was the part of the day she liked best. The quiet hum of lights flickering on, the scent of beans in the grinder, the first hiss of steam. She liked mornings because they didn't ask much of her. Just focus. Warmth. Efficiency. And a little kindness. Naomi gave all of that, easily. The regulars came like clockwork. Mrs. Ellington with her almond latte and crossword. James, the freelance writer, who barely spoke before 9 a.m. And Marcus. He had started coming 6 months ago. Always in a navy coat, clean-shaven, and carrying a tired kind of charisma. The kind that wasn't loud but pulled you in. His order was consistent: cappuccino, extra foam, no sugar. And after a while, he added small talk. A compliment on her earrings. A remark about the playlist. Then one day, he stayed longer. She learned his name. That he worked in Midtown. That he was in the middle of some life stuff, which he said with a half-laugh, the kind that hinted at divorce without saying it. Naomi didn't push. He seemed sad in a way she understood, not dramatic, just worn. Familiar. Like someone who needed a place to exhale. She became that place. By the 3rd month, he waited until her break and invited her to sit. Just for 10 minutes. Just coffee. Then it became 20. Then they started texting. Then dinner. Then her fingers brushing his jacket when no one was looking. He never said the word marriage. And she never asked. Naomi wasn't naive. But she wanted to believe what he gave her. She wanted it to be real. Until Tuesday. It started like any other morning. Light snowfall outside. A line of customers snaking near the door. Naomi moved quickly, efficiently, her hands steady even under the pressure of the rush. She was wiping down the counter when a mobile order came in. She checked the name field. It was blank. Not uncommon, some customers didn't bother to type one in. But the note section wasn't blank. One line. Written carefully. "I know who you are." She froze. Her fingers tightened slightly around the phone. It wasn't signed. No emoji. No follow-up. Just that sentence. Sitting there in a font too clean to match the weight of the words. Naomi blinked. Looked up. Scanned the shop. No one unusual. Just the regulars. A tourist couple by the window. A young woman with headphones waiting by the pastry case. She called the name for the next drink and started making the cappuccino. Extra foam. No sugar. Her heart beat faster, but her hands didn't tremble. Years of service had taught her how to perform calmness. She placed the lid on gently and set it at the pickup counter. No one approached. The cup sat there for nearly 5 minutes before a delivery runner picked it up. Naomi didn't recognize him. He left without saying a word. She tried to brush it off. A prank. A jealous ex. A mistake. But the pit in her stomach grew heavier. During her break, she stepped into the back room, pulled out her phone, and opened Marcus's last message. It was from the night before. "Tomorrow morning? Same time. Same place. I need to see your face." She didn't reply. Instead, she sat on a crate of milk cartons and stared at the wall. She thought about the way Marcus always turned his phone face down when they were together. How he never invited her to his place. How he never called after 10 p.m. She had accepted these things. She had rationalized them. Now, one sentence, 6 words was unraveling everything. When she returned to the counter, Marcus was there. He smiled at her the same way. Tilted his head. Took his usual seat. But Naomi didn't sit with him that day. She handed him his cappuccino. Their fingers brushed. He looked up, a flicker of confusion passing through his eyes. "You okay?" She nodded. "Busy morning." He sipped. Didn't press. She watched him walk out 10 minutes later, coat pulled tight, steam rising from the lid of his cup. And for the first time in weeks, she wondered. What else does she know? And what will she do with it? It was just after noon when the woman entered the coffee shop. The midday lull had begun, enough of a break after the morning rush for Naomi to breathe, but not long enough to truly rest. She was wiping down the pastry case when she saw her. The woman didn't look out of place. In fact, she blended in so well it made Naomi uneasy. Tan coat, dark jeans, low ponytail. No makeup, but she didn't need any. Her features were sharp, sculpted. She had the look of someone who had walked through many rooms and been noticed in every single one. She walked directly to the counter. Naomi offered a polite smile. "Hi, what can I get for you?" The woman didn't return the smile. "Cappuccino," she said. "Extra foam. No sugar." Naomi hesitated, but only for a beat. She punched the order in and turned toward the espresso machine. She could feel the woman watching her. Not glancing, watching. Like she was cataloging every movement. Naomi kept her hands steady, measured out the espresso, frothed the milk, poured with the same care she always did. But something about the air shifted. The warmth in the shop dulled. The light felt harsher. She placed the drink on the counter. "Here you go." The woman reached for it, but didn't take it right away. She looked down at the cup, then back up at Naomi. "He used to love it with extra foam," she said calmly. "Not too hot. Just like how he wanted you, I suppose." Naomi's breath caught. Her fingers curled slightly on the edge of the counter. The woman picked up the cup and took a long, slow sip. She didn't break eye contact. "It's good," she said. "You're good. I'll give you that." Then she turned, walked 3 steps, and paused by the napkin station. She pulled something from her coat pocket. Folded. Crisp. A receipt. She slid it onto the counter near the tip jar, then walked out without another word. Naomi didn't move until the door shut behind her. Then she picked up the paper. On the back, in the same neat handwriting as the mobile order, it said, "The wife always knows." Her chest felt hollow. Not broken, erased. She stood there, the cup still steaming faintly, and felt a wave of nausea climb from her gut to her throat. She didn't need to ask how the woman found her. Didn't need to ask why she came. She just stood there, holding a receipt that didn't scream. It didn't threaten. It simply stated a fact. A fact that pulled Naomi out of whatever illusion she had been living in. The shame came fast. Red and hot. Burning behind her eyes. It wasn't because she had done something wrong, exactly, she hadn't known. But the guilt wasn't logical. It was visceral. As if her hands were dirty from holding something that was never hers. She walked to the back, locked the door behind her, and sat on the bench with the receipt still in her hand. She read the words again. And again. She thought of Marcus. Of the way he laughed, soft and low. The way he texted late at night but never picked up a call past 10. The way he told her she was a secret he wanted to protect, not hide. She had believed him. Now, she wasn't sure if she believed anything at all. The espresso machine hissed behind the wall. A new order pinged on the register. The world outside didn't stop. But inside her, something had. And she wasn't sure it would start again the same way. Naomi didn't tell Marcus. She didn't answer his texts. She didn't block his number either. She just let the messages pile up, quiet as dust. But the silence changed things. At work, people noticed. Her smile faded a little faster. Her movements lost their rhythm. And there was something else, something in the way her co-workers looked at her, like they knew something she didn't. Like she had become part of a story told in whispers. By Thursday, the tension had built into a pressure she could feel in her spine. She arrived early that morning, before opening. The air was sharp with the smell of bleach and fresh grounds. The lights above the espresso bar buzzed faintly. Someone had already been there, milk cartons stacked, machines primed, and a drink left just for her on the back counter. A cappuccino, Extra foam. No sugar. No name on the cup. But it was warm. Fresh. Meant for her. She stared at it. Her name wasn't on the order list. She hadn't asked for it. But this place ran on routine, and someone maybe out of habit, maybe out of kindness had made it for her. Naomi hesitated. She'd been on edge since the woman's visit, her nerves fraying quietly at the seams. She reached out. Picked it up. Took a sip. The taste was wrong. Not burnt. Not spoiled. Just, wrong. Bitter in a way she couldn't explain. Metallic. Her chest tightened. Her hand trembled slightly as she set the cup down. Her heart was beating too fast. She looked around. The shop was still empty. Her co-worker hadn't arrived yet. No one was there. Suddenly, the light seemed too bright. She moved toward the bathroom, gripping the counter for balance. Her vision blurred at the edges. Her throat felt dry. Her skin went cold. She stumbled into the restroom, locked the door, and leaned over the sink. Her reflection stared back pale, drawn, eyes wide. Her lips were losing color. A wave of dizziness crashed through her. She fumbled for her phone, nearly dropping it. Her fingers couldn't move fast enough, but she found the emergency dial. 911, she whispered, her voice barely audible. The dispatcher answered. Help, Naomi gasped. Something's wrong. I think I'm dash. She didn't finish the sentence. The phone slipped from her hand. The last thing she saw before the blackness crept in was the edge of the mirror and the faint smear of lipstick on the coffee cup she'd left behind. The hospital ceiling was white. Too white. The kind of white that made you forget time, forget sound. Naomi blinked slowly, the light above her like a dull star pressed into her vision. She didn't remember arriving. Just fragments: the mirror, her hand slipping, the voice on the phone growing faint. Then black. Now this. Her chest rose and fell under the stiff blanket. N4 was taped to her arm. Her mouth tasted like metal and cotton. She turned her head. No flowers. No cards. No Marcus. Only the sterile beep of a machine monitoring her pulse. A nurse entered quietly. Smiled the kind of smile meant for recovery rooms and slow news. You're lucky, she said, adjusting Naomi's drip. Whatever it was, you called just in time. Naomi tried to ask, but her throat cracked instead. The nurse offered water. Don't push yourself. The police are waiting. They won't keep you long. Naomi nodded, her mind still fogged. An officer arrived an hour later. Plainclothes. Clipboard. Calm voice. We didn't find anything conclusive, he said. Toxicology's clean. But there was a packet of sugar left open on the back counter. Traces of something unknown, possibly plant-based. Nothing lethal. But enough to trigger a reaction. Naomi stared at him. Who? He shook his head. No fingerprints. No footage. No one saw anything. It could have been a prank. Could have been personal. Could have been nothing. Could have been anything. She was discharged 2 days later. No one came to pick her up. Back in her apartment, the air felt wrong. Like it had been holding its breath while she was gone. She sat on the edge of her bed, bag still by the door, and tried to breathe in something that didn't feel like fear. Then the knock came. She opened the door to find a plain box. No return label. No courier. Just her name, typed neatly on top. She brought it inside slowly. Set it on the kitchen table. Opened it with shaking hands. Inside, a single folded piece of paper. No threats. No signature. Just handwriting. You'll live. I just wanted you to taste what it feels like. Naomi stared at the note. Read it once. Then again. Then pressed it flat against the table as if it might reveal something more. It didn't. She didn't scream. Didn't cry. Just stood there in the quiet of her kitchen with her pulse thudding in her ears. The next day, she quit her job. She changed her number. Deleted her social media. Found a short-term lease in another part of the city and moved out within the week. She left no forwarding address. No explanations. She didn't say goodbye to anyone. She didn't want to explain why she flinched at the smell of coffee, why she avoided mirrors, why she stopped drinking anything she hadn't poured herself. The world didn't need to know. It already had. At night, she dreamed of steam rising from a cappuccino. Of a lipstick smear on porcelain. Of eyes that smiled without warmth. And every morning she woke with the same thought. She hadn't died. But something inside her had. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just left a cup behind. With a message no antidote could erase. But in our next story, a man from the Upper West Side did everything right. Anniversary trips. Baby plans. He even forgave a late-night text from a co-worker named Jordan. Until one night, he picked up her phone and realized Jordan was short for Jordanella. Stay with us for the next chapter in 10 True Affair Stories from New York. Because sometimes, the betrayal isn't in what you find. It's in who you thought you knew. He planned the nursery. He booked the anniversary trip. He forgave the late-night texts from someone named Jordan. Until one night, he opened her phone. And Jordan had long red nails, a wine glass, and lips that weren't his wife's. Ethan from the Upper West Side, Jordan wasn't short for what he thought. Series, 10 True Affair Stories from New York. Ethan never checked her phone. It wasn't about trust, it was about respect. Boundaries. Space. All the things he believed made a marriage stronger. For 5 years, that belief had served them well. Or so he thought. It was late, close to midnight, when she finally fell asleep. They'd spent the evening choosing baby names, narrowing down options for the nursery paint. He remembered how her eyes lit up at the name Mila. How she rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, "It's really happening, isn't it?" Now she was curled under the blanket, breathing softly. Ethan reached for her phone only to set the morning alarm. Hers was synced with the smart lights. He had done it before. It was routine. He tapped the screen. The background glowed gently, an ultrasound photo she'd set as wallpaper. His heart tightened in the familiar way it always did when he saw it. And then the notification appeared. "Jordan, can't wait to see you tonight, red heart." He froze. Not because of what it said, but because of the name. Jordan. Jordan was her co-worker. The one she mentioned often. The one who made her laugh at 10 p.m. text messages. The one whose name always came with the phrase, "It's just work." His thumb hovered over the screen. He shouldn't. But he tapped. The message thread opened. The last 10 messages scrolled up easily, breezy, flirty, fast-paced. Some were short. "Missing you already. Loved last night. Same time tomorrow." Others weren't so short. Ethan sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. His heart didn't race. It sank. Quietly. Like something heavy dropped into dark water. He scrolled up. Photos. Inside jokes. Voice notes. One of them ended with her giggling and whispering, "I wish I could stay longer." He read everything. Not once did the word work appear. Not once was there a hint of professional context. Just intimacy. Familiarity. A rhythm between them that had clearly been established for months. He stared at the screen. Trying to blink it away. Trying to invent an alternate explanation. Maybe Jordan was a nickname. Maybe this was someone else. But the tone. The way she responded. The words she used, those weren't for a friend. He placed the phone back on the nightstand. He didn't shake her awake. He didn't shout. Instead, he stood, walked to the kitchen, and sat in the dark. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. The living room was still. Too still. As if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Ethan put his head in his hands. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not now. Not when they were planning a family. Not when he had already pictured her in the delivery room, gripping his hand, crying with joy. He thought of the registry they'd started. The doctor's appointments. The way she looked at baby clothes like they were miracles stitched in cotton. And then he thought of Jordan. Whoever Jordan was. He tried to rationalize. Maybe it was emotional. Maybe it hadn't become physical. Maybe it was just a phase, something born out of fear, anxiety, restlessness. But even that thought didn't comfort him. Because whatever it was, it had been shared. And it hadn't been shared with him. When he finally returned to the bedroom, she was still sleeping peacefully. Her arm draped across the pillow. The faint trace of a smile on her lips. Ethan watched her for a long time. And for the first time in 5 years, he realized. There were parts of her he didn't know. And someone else did. Ethan sat in the kitchen long after the sky turned from black to gray. He hadn't slept. He hadn't moved much, either. Just stared at nothing, the phone still in his hand, the conversation burned into his brain. By 6 a.m., she was still asleep. He padded quietly back into the bedroom, sat on the floor beside the bed, and opened her phone again. This time, he opened Instagram. He typed in Jordan. The first suggestion was Jordanella. Her profile popped up instantly. Public. Polished. Confident. The woman in the profile photo had long auburn hair, a strong jawline, and a gaze that didn't flinch. She was standing on a rooftop, cocktail in hand, city lights behind her like a crown. And right there, in her bio, it said, she/her. Ethan stared. Jordan. Jordanella. Not a nickname. Not a male co-worker. Not someone from her marketing team. A woman. He scrolled through the feed. Pictures of wine nights. Art galleries. A selfie in a hotel mirror that looked painfully familiar. The tone was effortless, magnetic. Ethan could see it why someone might be drawn in. He went back to the texts. Read them again. The pronouns were all there. Clear. Intentional. My girl. She makes me feel like I can breathe again. Us. He hadn't seen them clearly the first time. Hadn't wanted to. Now, they screamed. His wife hadn't been hiding a friendship. She hadn't even been hiding an affair, not exactly. What she had been hiding was herself. And the version of her she gave to Jordanella wasn't the one Ethan knew. He felt cold. Not the kind of cold that makes you shiver, but the kind that numbs. That spread slowly, like a realization you can't unsee. It wasn't the betrayal that gutted him most. It was that someone else had been given the version of her that was free. Raw. Honest. And he, the husband, had been left with the curated one. The one that smiled politely, discussed crib options, and texted him reminders about prenatal vitamins. Ethan rested the phone on his lap. He didn't feel rage. Just a strange stillness, like the moment before a storm or the moment after. She stirred behind him in bed, mumbling something in her sleep. He didn't turn. He already knew what she would say. Or worse, what she wouldn't. The silence between them was no longer soft. It was loaded. And for the first time in their marriage, Ethan wasn't sure whose life he'd been living. But he knew whose he hadn't. Ethan didn't confront her the next morning. Or the one after that. He didn't even flinch when she leaned over to kiss his cheek and ask if he wanted scrambled or poached. He just watched. For days, he observed the rhythm of their life like someone watching a play they'd once acted in. The gestures were the same: morning coffee, shared calendars, grocery runs, but something inside him had stepped out of sync. The set hadn't changed. The roles had. When she left her laptop open, he read her emails. Most were routine. Work-related. But mixed in, buried between spreadsheets and brand pitch drafts, were threads from an encrypted address. The name wasn't signed, but he didn't need it to be. The subject lines were innocuous: options, let's revisit, next steps. But the contents were anything but. They spoke of money being moved slowly, small withdrawals disguised as routine expenses. Notes about IVF consultations in California. A timeline that aligned suspiciously well with Ethan's planned work trip in the fall. One email read, "I want us settled before New York freezes over." Ethan scrolled down to a thread of shared links: real estate listings, fertility clinic reviews, Flights tagged one way. All neatly planned. Not a word about him. Not even a lie. It wasn't a betrayal of passion. It was logistics. Strategy. Execution. The baby? A possibility, but maybe not his. He closed the laptop slowly, gently, as though not to wake something more dangerous. The next evening, they had dinner together. Thai takeout. The same place they always ordered from on Wednesdays. She laughed about a co-worker's typo. She touched his arm when she asked if he remembered to buy more oat milk. He watched her as if she were a stranger using his wife's voice. When she turned to put the dishes in the sink, he spoke. "Do you still love me?" She froze. One hand still holding a spoon. Then, without turning, she said, "That's not the question you want to ask." He didn't press. Later, after she went to bed, he stayed up in the living room. The email thread was still open in his head like a tab he couldn't close. He walked into their bedroom. She was awake. He stood in the doorway. How long? She didn't pretend. Didn't dodge. She sat up. Her face unreadable. Long enough, she said. Why didn't you just tell me? She hesitated, then looked him straight in the eye. I stopped being your wife long before I met her. The words landed without sound. No crash. No echo. Just the dull weight of something final. Ethan didn't cry. He only nodded. Then turned around and closed the door behind him. The silence afterward wasn't empty. It was absolute. Ethan left on a Monday. He packed before sunrise. A duffel bag, a laptop, a small box of photos he hadn't looked at in months. No ceremony. No suitcase. Just the things he wouldn't want to miss if he never came back. The apartment was quiet. She was still asleep when he zipped the bag. Or maybe pretending to be. He didn't check. He brewed a pot of coffee out of habit. Let it sit untouched. The sound of the drip machine was the only thing that moved in the room. The light outside hadn't turned gold yet. It was the gray kind of morning that makes everything look like it belongs to no one. He placed his wedding ring on the kitchen table. Next to it, a folded sheet of paper. The handwriting was his. Sharp, clear. Not angry. Next time, just tell the truth. It hurts less than being replaced by a plan. He left the keys in the dish by the door. Didn't look back. He didn't text. Didn't call. Didn't leave a forwarding address. The only thing he carried from that apartment, besides the bag, was his breath. And for the first time in weeks, it felt full. On the train out of the city, he stared at the blur of tunnels giving way to sky. He thought about what had ended and what hadn't. He hadn't lost a wife. He'd stepped out of a role. One he didn't know he'd been cast in. One that came with a script he never wrote, full of lines he no longer believed. Maybe she never loved him the way he thought. Maybe she had. Maybe she just changed. He didn't know. He didn't need to. Because in the end, it wasn't the betrayal that undid him. It was the planning. The meetings, the clinics, the one-way flights all drawn up in quiet, while he memorized lullaby lyrics. He had never wanted perfection. Just partnership. But what he'd been living in was performance. He leaned his head against the window. Didn't cry. Didn't need to. He was done trying to understand a silence that had already answered everything. And that, he thought, was the closest thing to peace he'd felt in a long time. He didn't scream. He didn't chase. He just walked away. From a life someone else had written for him. But in our next story, a woman from Harlem never suspected a thing. Until her son, barely old enough to spell dad, asked a question at breakfast. A question no child should know to ask. A question that cracked everything. Stay with us for the next chapter in 10 True Affair Stories from New York. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't come from a lover. It comes from the only witness who didn't know how to lie.
He was 6. Too young to lie. Too young to know what betrayal meant. But old enough to hear things. And one morning, at breakfast, he asked a question. Just loud enough to shatter everything. Monique from Harlem, her son asked the wrong question at the right time. Series 10 True Affair Stories from New York. The morning was ordinary. A shaft of soft light filtered through the blinds, slicing across the kitchen counter in golden ribbons. The smell of toasted waffles mixed with warm maple syrup and a hint of brewed coffee. The low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional clink of a spoon against a ceramic bowl created the rhythm of a weekend morning in Harlem. Monique moved with calm efficiency. Hair tied back, oversized hoodie slipping off one shoulder, she scooped scrambled eggs onto a plate while humming something faint and forgettable. Malik, her 6-year-old, swung his feet at the table, already halfway through his cereal, his curls still messy from sleep. "Mom," he said, his mouth half full, "if Uncle Sean sleeps here every night, why did Daddy say yesterday, you think I don't know?" The spoon in her hand didn't fall. But it stopped, suspended in midair over the sink. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to grow louder. "What did you say, baby?" Malik, unfazed, dug another spoonful of cereal. "I heard him say that when you were in the shower." He was loud. He sounded mad. And then Uncle Sean left. Monique turned slowly, her hands now resting on the counter. Her face didn't betray much, at least not to a 6-year-old. But inside, her chest tightened, sharp and sudden. She hadn't seen Andre in weeks. They shared custody. He was due to pick up Malik next weekend. There was no reason he should have been near the apartment. No reason Sean should have been speaking to him at all. She walked over and poured orange juice into Malik's cup, steadying her breath. "You heard that last night?" Malik nodded. "I wasn't sleeping. I was playing with my flashlight." Monique offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Finish your cereal, sweetheart." She turned her back and stared into the sink, the egg pan now cooling. Her thoughts splintered. Sean had told her he got held up at work. Something about late-night strategy calls. He texted at 10:22 p.m. still at the office, "Babe, don't wait up." But she had waited. He came home near midnight, smelling faintly of sweat and asphalt. He kissed her like everything was fine. And now, her observant, innocent Malik had just cracked something wide open. She didn't confront. Not yet. Instead, she moved on autopilot, cleaned the counter, folded a dish towel, turned on cartoons in the living room. Malik laughed as he always did, lying on his stomach, feet kicking in the air. But Monique stood by the kitchen doorway, watching the light shift on the floor. Sean had been a safe place. Or so she thought. A friend of Andre's from back when life was different, back when Monique still believed in stability. After the divorce, when everything fell apart, Sean had shown up with groceries and quiet kindness. Not romantic at first. Just present. And then it became more. She had trusted the timing. The slow build. The way Malik took to him, called him Uncle Sean before anyone told him to. She had asked Sean, early on, whether he still talked to Andre. Not since the fallout, he'd said. That bridge burned itself. She had believed him. Now, Malik's words echoed in her skull, bouncing off every corner. You think I don't know? A threat? A challenge? A confrontation she hadn't been there to see. She replayed the night in her head. The moments that didn't fit. The way Sean had looked at his phone too long. The pause before he kissed her goodnight. She opened a cabinet and took out a mug. Poured herself coffee. It had gone lukewarm. She didn't warm it again. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table and stared out the window. Outside, the city moved on like it always did, oblivious to the crack forming inside her chest. Not explosive. Not dramatic. Just a slow, hairline fracture that started with a child's question and refused to stop growing. She looked over at Malik, laughing at cartoons, utterly untouched by what he'd just broken. And for the first time since Sean came into their lives, Monique didn't feel safe. She felt watched. The next few days, Monique didn't sleep the same. Not badly, just lighter. Like her body no longer trusted the walls around her. She moved through her routines with the same grace, but something had shifted underneath. Sean would kiss her cheek in the mornings, Malik would run into her arms after school. The cartoons still played too loud during dinner. But behind it all, there was a silence in her that was no longer peaceful. It was alert. It began with the camera. She hadn't touched the doorbell footage in weeks. But Monday night, while Malik was coloring and Sean was in the shower, she opened the app, scrolled back. Nothing on Friday. But Thursday there it was. 9:43 p.m. Andre's car. She recognized it immediately, the chipped mirror, the dent near the license plate. Parked just across the street. Headlights off. Engine on for 10 minutes. Then, 9:56. Sean arriving. He didn't notice the car. Or maybe he did and didn't care. That alone was enough to make her stomach turn. She began looking deeper. Sean's texts were clean. Too clean. No evidence of contact with Andre. But something about that was off. He usually left a trail. Memes. Group chats. Random check-ins. Now just bland replies, too few, too polite. So she looked at the GPS. Their phones were linked once when she helped him find his car in a Target parking lot. She still had access. The history was mostly consistent. But 2 nights last week, the location just stopped. Not offline. Not lost. Just paused. She asked him once, casually, "Where were you Tuesday night again?" "Team drinks." "I told you." "You did," she smiled. "I forgot." But she hadn't. Tuesday was one of the GPS gaps. And her gut was no longer willing to ignore the obvious. On Wednesday, she picked Malik up early from school and took him to the park. He was building a Lego structure in the sandbox when he looked up and said, "Mom." "Yes, baby." "Uncle Sean said not to tell you, but, if you did know, maybe you'd be sad. But maybe you'd also understand." She crouched beside him. "When did he say that?" Malik shrugged. "Last week. When we were getting ice cream. He said adults lie when they don't want to lose something." Her heart clenched. She kissed his forehead and told him to keep building. But her hands were shaking as she texted her lawyer. That night, Sean brought flowers. No occasion. Just daisies in a wrapped paper cone. She smiled. Thanked him. Placed them in the vase. Then watched him as he went to the bathroom. Something about the way he washed his hands, the casual hum he made like nothing was wrong, felt surreal. Manufactured. Like watching someone play a version of himself. When he came back out, she said, "You ever talk to Andre?" He froze for half a second. It was subtle. "Not since the divorce," he said, sipping his water. She nodded slowly. "Right. That's what you said before." He leaned in. "Why?" "No reason," she lied. But she was already writing the ending in her head. Not because she had the proof, but because she had the pattern. And that was enough. She didn't do it with a raised voice. No trap, no performance. She made dinner. Set the table. Lit a candle. Told Malik he could eat in the living room tonight. Just this once. Extra cartoons, full permission. Then she waited. Sean arrived like any other night. He kissed her forehead, complimented the smell in the kitchen, washed his hands at the sink. He asked how her day was. She told him it was fine. Halfway through the meal, she reached under the table and pulled out a small folder. She slid it across to him. Quiet. Deliberate. He looked at it, then at her. "What's this?" "You'll recognize it." He opened the folder. Inside, a printout of the camera footage. A screenshot of the GPS history. A transcript of texts between him and Andre, forwarded from a shared device. And Malik's words, written in Monique's own handwriting. Sean blinked. He didn't reach for the water. Didn't deny. Instead, he leaned back in a chair. The candlelight flickered across his face. "Okay," he said. "You want it straight. I think I deserve it." He took a breath. Andre reached out after the custody battle started going sideways. Said he needed leverage. Said if I could get close to you, get footage of you, unstable, angry, anything, he could use it in court. He didn't want full custody. Just enough to scare you. Control the schedule. Her face didn't move. I said no, Sean continued. At first. But then I saw you again. And I said yes. Told myself I'd just check in. Be a presence. Nothing serious. But it got serious, she said. He nodded. I didn't expect you to still be you. She studied him. Not the way his shoulders slumped now, not the tension in his jaw. Just the way his eyes never left hers. He wasn't trying to escape it. Not anymore. And you've still been talking to him? Sean hesitated. Yes. The word dropped like metal. For how long? Since the beginning. Weekly. Then, less. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. Was there ever a moment you thought about telling me the truth? He swallowed. Yes. But you didn't. I was afraid. Afraid of losing me? Afraid you'd see what I was. She exhaled, slow. VY, not ETU, she said softly. I was just a tool. Sean shook his head. You weren't. But you were part of a plan I should have burned the moment I stepped into your kitchen. Silence stretched between them. He didn't cry. Neither did she. The candle burned low. The food grew cold. Monique stood, picked up her plate, and walked it to the sink. You need to go now? Sean nodded. I'm sorry. She didn't answer. Didn't slam the door when it closed. She just stood there, hands in the sink, water running over her fingers. The sound drowned everything else. And the silence, finally, felt clean. The apartment felt different after he left. Not quieter. Just emptied of pretense. Monique didn't cry. She didn't collapse on the couch or pour a drink or turn on music to fill the room. She just sat at the kitchen table with the same candle still burning, flickering against the folders she hadn't moved. By morning, she had already called her lawyer. She didn't want revenge. She wanted clarity. Control. Peace. Something she could build around Malik that didn't wobble under someone else's lies. Her request was simple, full custody. No shared schedule. No leverage. She didn't want Andre's shadow passing through her life every other weekend. She wanted her son's routine unbroken by manipulation. New Jersey wasn't far. Just far enough. A short-term lease, walking distance to a good school, close to her work. A friend of a friend had the place. No questions asked. No history to erase. She gave herself a week. In that time, she packed slowly. Selectively. Photos, yes. Kitchen tools. Malik's favorite blankets. No furniture. Nothing heavy. The apartment had always held too much weight anyway. She changed her number. Cancelled Sean's access to Malik's school pickup list. Blocked Andre's email. The only message she sent out was short. To Andre. Our son doesn't need to know who betrayed me. He just needs to know who protected him. She didn't wait for a reply. Didn't expect one. On the last night in Harlem, she let Malik fall asleep on the couch. She watched him breathe, one arm curled under his cheek, cartoons still flickering on mute. She brushed a curl off his forehead and whispered, "We're going somewhere new. You'll like it. It's quiet there." He didn't stir. The next morning, she tied his shoes at the threshold of their new apartment. He fidgeted, excited. There was a park nearby. A cat in the window upstairs. The neighbors waved when they passed. Monique knelt to double knot his laces. Her hands were steady. She looked up at him, this small, bright human who had unknowingly dismantled a lie with one question over breakfast. And for the first time in weeks, she smiled. Not wide, but true. She didn't feel victorious. She felt ready. And sometimes, that was enough. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need closure. She just needed a new zip code. And a pair of shoes to tie every morning. But in our next story, a woman from Chelsea thought she was the only one. Until she walked into a bar on a Wednesday night. And saw him. With someone else. Wearing the same smile. He used to save for her. Stay with us for the next chapter in 10 True Affair Stories from New York. Because sometimes, you're not the one being cheated on. You're the one being used to do it. He held her hand. He poured the wine. He whispered the same line. In the same bar. At the same table. To someone who wasn't her. But she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just watched. And realized. She wasn't the one being cheated on. She was the one used to do it. Lena from Chelsea, she wasn't the one being cheated on. She was the one used to do it. Series 10 True Affair Stories from New York. The bar was dim and familiar, tucked between a wine shop and a florist Lena loved on 19th. She walked in out of the February wind, pulling her scarf loose and scanning for Olivia. But Olivia had just texted. Emergency shoot. Rain check. I owe you a whiskey. Lena smiled at the screen, tucked it away, and hesitated by the door. She could turn around, head back to her apartment, pour a glass of something and let the night dissolve. But the warmth of the place, the soft jazz overhead, the faint scent of orange peel and cloves convinced her to stay. Maybe just one drink. Maybe just 15 minutes. She moved toward the bar, found a corner stool, and ordered a dry white. The bartender remembered her, poured without asking. She looked around, absently. The room hadn't changed. Same flickering candles and short glasses, same couple in the booth near the window, arguing gently about red or white. Her eyes drifted toward the back, past the velvet curtain that half hid the booths where couples went when they wanted to disappear. And then she saw him. Ben. Seated in the far booth. Relaxed. Laughing. Not with her. The woman across from him had long dark hair, a soft silk blouse, her hand resting lightly on the table. Lena couldn't see her face, but she saw the shape of the smile, the way her head tilted. She watched as Ben poured her a glass of wine. Not handed but poured. Smooth, practiced. The same way he'd done for Lena the night they first kissed. In this very booth. At that exact table. With that exact bottle. She didn't move. He touched the woman's wrist as he set down the bottle. Gentle. Deliberate. The way he used to with her. Like she was made of something delicate he never wanted to break. Lena blinked. The candle on the bar flickered, and for a moment she thought she was watching a memory. But it wasn't. It was happening now. The smile he wore, half playful, half worshipful, was one she'd memorized. It was his just us smile. The one he'd given her when she asked him, early on, if he ever wanted something real. The smile that had said, without words, "This is it. We are." Lena picked up her wine glass but didn't sip. She didn't confront. She didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. She just watched. He leaned in. Said something. The woman laughed, low and warm. And then he reached out, brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. That did it. Not the touch. The gesture. Because it wasn't just familiar. It was rehearsed. Copied. Perfectly replicated from a night that had once meant everything to Lena. She set the glass down. Stood. Walked out into the cold. She didn't shake. Didn't rage. The city moved around her fast, alive, indifferent. But inside her, something had stilled. It wasn't heartbreak. It was recognition. Not of Ben. Of the role she'd played. She hadn't been loved uniquely. She'd been repeated. And for someone who lived by the lens, who trusted the power of framing and light, there was no greater betrayal than realizing you were just a double exposure in someone else's archive. She walked home without checking her phone. The white wine still on her tongue. And the image of that booth, her booth now shared, now mirrored, now ruined, stamped behind her eyes like the afterimage of a flash. She knew one thing as she unlocked her door. This wasn't over. But it wouldn't be loud. It would be studied. And this time, she'd be the one behind the camera. She didn't sleep much that night. Not from crying. From thinking. At 3:14 a.m., Lena pulled the old Nikon from the closet. The one with the cracked grip and the 50mm lens she loved for portraits. She hadn't used it in months, not since she started shooting weddings full-time. But this wasn't work. This was study. She started with Instagram. Ben's account was private, but he'd accepted her follow months ago. She scrolled. And scrolled. He rarely posted, but when he did it was curated. Cityscapes, obscure books, whiskey, occasional glimpses of restaurant interiors with no people in frame. She looked closer. There. A reflection in a wine glass. A strand of long, dark hair in the corner of the frame. Same wine bar. Different night. She took screenshots. She checked mutuals, people he followed, liked, interacted with. One woman posted a carousel from the High Line 2 weeks ago. Second image, Ben's jacket sleeve. His watch. The exact watch Lena had once gifted him for his birthday. More screenshots. She found another, brunch in Williamsburg. A caption with 2 wine glasses clinking. Third image, a mirror shot, Ben's profile in soft blur. Each detail layered. Every caption, every location, versions of a life she thought was theirs. replayed, repackaged. She started to map it. Not digitally on her wall. Old school. Printouts. Strings of notes. Black pins for overlaps. Red pins for identical spots. The wine bar, the bookstore in Nolita, the bench in Central Park where he once told her he wasn't ready, but might be. That line had been repeated, word for word, in a comment he left on someone else's page last month. She checked her phone messages, voice memos, her own photos. Everything began to blur. Ben hadn't been improvising. He'd been performing. And she had been just one of the scenes. The thing that twisted deeper than betrayal was how carefully it had all been recycled. Nothing sloppy. Nothing desperate. Just efficient. Rehearsed. Refined through repetition. It wasn't about love. It was about symmetry. She set up her tripod the next day. Started shooting herself in the apartment, same poses she remembered from his photos of her. She reenacted the gestures, the laughter, the angles. Then she'd go out and shoot from behind corners, from a rooftop, from behind glass, watching Ben, following the new her. She never interfered. Never got too close. Just observed. Each shot went into a folder labeled, replica. Some nights, she'd stare at two photos side by side, hers and this woman's, same hand position, same scarf, same tilt of the head as Ben leaned in. She wasn't jealous. She was fascinated. He hadn't just repeated a relationship. He had recast it. And what she had mistaken for romance had been a study in consistency. It wasn't until she saw the woman wearing the same leather gloves she'd once lost in his apartment, gloves she'd never found, that Lena understood something truly cold. She hadn't been cheated on. She'd been practiced, tested. A soft launch for a better performance. By the end of the week, Lena had over 40 prints laid out on her apartment floor like a gallery. She stood over them barefoot, sipping lukewarm coffee, and saw the shape of it all. The curve of Ben's manipulation wasn't a spike of cruelty. It was a loop. A loop he didn't even bother to disguise. And now she had it. In frame. In focus. Unmistakable. The bar was quieter than usual. Rain pressed against the windows in steady rhythm, muting the jazz in the background. Lena arrived early, chose the same booth, the one where Ben had first poured her wine. She set the small projector on the table. No menu. No drink. Just silence and anticipation. Ben arrived 5 minutes late, umbrella dripping at the entrance. He spotted her immediately. Hesitated. Then walked over like nothing was off. "You look focused," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. She didn't answer. She pressed play. The projector hummed. The first photo appeared on the blank wall beside them. Ben, smiling. A woman, long dark hair, laughing. Same table. Same wine. His hand on hers. Second slide. A different cafe. Same chairs. Her scarf. Her coat. His eyes fixed, familiar. Third. Park bench. Their bench. Another woman. Same hand on thigh. Slide after slide. Angle after angle. All perfectly framed. The same choreography. Different actresses. Ben didn't flinch. Didn't ask her to stop. He watched it like a man attending his own retrospective. When it ended, Lena didn't move. She let the last image linger, her own face, next to a newer one. Their heads tilted at identical angles. Two ghosts in the same light. She turned to him. "Did you love me?" she asked. "Or did you just recycle well?" Ben leaned back, folded his hands. "You were the only one who saw it," he said softly. "That's why it had to be you?" She studied him. "So I was just another version?" "No," he said. "You were the proof. The frame that cracked." He wasn't defensive. He wasn't cruel. He said it like fact. Lena nodded. Slowly. "That's all I needed to know." Ben didn't try to follow her when she stood. Didn't ask for forgiveness. Didn't deny anything. And that, more than anything, confirmed it all. She walked out into the rain, not with anger, not with closure, just with the certainty that her pain wasn't imagined. It was cured. And finally, archived. The gallery was small. Tucked behind a bookstore in the West Village, with whitewashed brick walls and hanging Edison bulbs that cast everything in warm amber. She called it Loops. No one who attended the opening knew the full story. They didn't need to. On the walls were 34 prints. Each image captured a nearly identical moment, staged across time, places, and people. A man's hand brushing a lock of hair. A shared glass of wine with blurred city lights behind it. The tilt of a smile caught in half shadow. Arms wrapped around waists on park benches. Whispered words in the soft corners of cafes. Different women. Same gestures. Same choreography. The repetition was deliberate. Haunting in its subtlety. Lena didn't include names. No faces were fully shown. Only fragments. The intention was not to shame. It was to reveal. And to remember. She moved through the space as the crowd did. Quiet. Watching people tilt their heads, murmur to each other, feel a strange familiarity they couldn't quite place. She heard one woman whisper, "This looks like my last relationship." Someone else, "It's beautiful, but kind of chilling." A man leaned closer to one photo and said, "Feels like you've seen it before, even if you haven't." When asked by a journalist if the collection was about a breakup, Lena answered simply, "No. It's a study of repetition. And what happens when you notice it." The write-up the next morning called it a quiet riot of emotional déjà vu. Lena didn't read the whole piece. She didn't need to. The photos had already said what she couldn't. She returned to the gallery alone after closing, sat in the middle of the floor, and looked up at the images like constellations. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel healed. But she felt real. She'd taken something rehearsed and made it unrepeatable. Not through revenge, but through witness. Through framing it. Through saying without saying, "I saw you. I saw me. I see it now." And that, in its own quiet way, was freedom. She didn't break him. She didn't expose him. She just showed him, through 34 frames, that she had been watching all along. But in our next story, a woman from Tribeca doesn't take quiet revenge. She doesn't make art out of her pain. She weaponizes the truth. Because when her fiancé's mistress confesses everything, they don't become enemies. They become partners. Stay with us for the next chapter in 10 True Affair Stories from New York. Because sometimes, the only thing worse than betrayal is realizing you were never the only one. And neither was she. She didn't scream. She didn't throw the ring. She just opened the email and saw him smiling with someone else. But when she met the other woman, there were no slaps, no shouting, just one question. How many times did he say, "You were the only one"? Riley from Tribeca, his mistress, told me everything. We didn't fight. We teamed up. Series 10 True Affair Stories from New York. The email arrived at 11:07 a.m. on a Tuesday. Riley had just finished the production meeting, still holding her oat milk latte in one hand, scrolling absently with the other. The subject line was blank. No sender name. No preview text. Just one attachment. She opened it. It was a photo. Crisp, well lit. Adam, her fiancé of 9 months, sitting at an outdoor cafe with a woman Riley had never seen. The woman leaned in, laughing, her hand resting lightly on his forearm. Adam, tailored coat, signature half-smile, looked back at her like no one else existed. He was still wearing the engagement ring Riley had slipped onto his finger last fall. No date stamp. No caption. Just the image. Riley stared at it for exactly 32 seconds before saving it to a folder titled Archive. She closed the email. Didn't delete it. She didn't text Adam. She didn't call a friend. She went to work. Reviewed casting reels. Approved lighting revisions. Ate lunch. But something in her head had shifted. Not like glass breaking. More like a subtle draft sneaking under a locked door. That night, while Adam cooked pasta and played Miles Davis through the Sonos, Riley smiled and asked him about his day. He said something about a studio call running long, how he'd skipped lunch, how he missed her. She nodded, kissed his cheek, and poured wine. When he fell asleep, she got to work. She started with facial recognition. Ran the woman's face through reverse image search. Nothing. But Adam wasn't careful. His world was cured, but repetitive. Riley knew his favorite spots, his angles. She searched recent tags at the cafe in the background. Found it within minutes. A reel from last week. There she was. The woman from the photo. Same coat. Same hair. Holding a cappuccino and laughing at someone off frame. Tag at Camille writes. Bio, content editor. Brooklyn. Occasional photographer. Dog lover. Riley clicked follow. Switched to a burner account. Met her from a second one. Then she waited. In the morning, Camille posted a story. A blurred photo of a journal. A quote scribbled across the page. "Love isn't blind. It's rehearsed." Riley stared at it longer than she meant to. She read every caption, every tag, every piece of tone Camille had ever offered online. She found birthday posts, playlists, shared sunsets. Phrases Adam had once said to her now said to Camille, word for word. There was no anger. Not yet. No heartbreak. What Riley felt was insulted. Not as a woman. As a thinker. As someone who had built a life on nuance and narrative. Who had trusted a man to improvise, and now realized he'd only ever memorized. She didn't cry. She Googled. She outlined. She prepared. The next day, she sent Camille a message. "Hi. I think we're both in the same film. Just in different scenes. Would you be willing to talk?" No emoji. No threat. Just curiosity. Camille replied within the hour. Yes. When and where? Riley chose a quiet place. Not for drama, but for clarity. They met at a small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner, the kind of place no one would expect to overhear anything serious. Riley arrived first. Black turtleneck, hair pulled back, notebook in hand. Camille showed up exactly on time, wearing a beige coat Riley recognized from Instagram. There was a moment of mutual study before either woman spoke. Camille sat. She looked tired, but not defensive. Riley opened her notebook and laid the photo gently on the table between them. Camille stared at it. "I didn't know," she said. Riley nodded. "I believe you." Camille looked up. "He's engaged?" 9 months. Camille exhaled sharply. Wow. Silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy. "He told me I made him believe in love again," Camille said, quietly. Riley gave a thin smile. "Me too. And probably someone before us." They compared notes. Same bar in the West Village. Same obscure jazz playlist. Same bouquet white peonies with a sprig of eucalyptus. Camille had photos. Riley had receipts. They pieced it together like forensic analysts. Each detail, each gesture, each word Adam had recycled like a favorite scene he couldn't stop reshooting. What should have been tense became oddly collaborative. Neither woman blamed the other. There was no betrayal between them. Only recognition. Riley sipped her coffee. "You're not the other woman. Neither am I. We're just interchangeable." Camille laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's worse, somehow." Riley nodded. "It is." They sat for a while longer. The city buzzed outside, unaware. Camille finally said, "So what now?" Riley looked her in the eye. "Now? We write a better scene." And just like that, the next act began. They met 3 times in 5 days. Quietly. Deliberately. Camille brought index cards and timelines. Riley handled structure. It was oddly cinematic the way they plotted not revenge, but revelation. The plan wasn't to destroy Adam. That would have been too easy. Too theatrical. What they wanted was silence. The kind that didn't need screaming to be heard. The kind that told the truth with a spotlight and no dialogue. Riley booked a private space under the pretense of a surprise engagement dinner. Small, tasteful. Only 10 guests. Just enough to feel intimate. Adam loved curated moments. This would be his favorite kind until it wasn't. Camille compiled the photos. Riley sourced the audio. They both contributed screen captures, love notes, voicemails. Everything was labeled. Cross-referenced. Matched side by side. The same quote repeated in 2 different hands. The same hotel suite with 2 different women. They dressed the room in white. No color. No distractions. A clean frame. Adam walked in at 7:13 p.m., wearing the navy blazer Riley had once said brought out his eyes. He smiled as if nothing in the world was wrong. Until the lights dimmed. And the projector clicked on. Slide 1, Adam, holding Riley's hand on a rooftop. Slide 2, Adam, holding Camille's hand on the same rooftop 11 months later. Then came the messages. Voicemails played over a soft piano score, his voice repeating the same promises, the same poetic turns, the same lies, with only the name swapped. A pause between clips. Then the screen split. Riley on one side. Camille on the other. Matching dresses. Matching tulips. Matching smiles. Adam didn't move. No one said his name. There was no confrontation. Only chronology. Truth, delivered in sequence. When it ended, the lights came up. The guests didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. Adam stood there, blinking. Riley walked past him without a word. Camille followed. They didn't look back. Outside, the night was cold, but crisp. Clean. Camille lit a cigarette with a shaky hand. Riley took it from her, inhaled once, and smiled. "We didn't set fire to anything," she said. Camille nodded. "No. We just turned on the lights." And they walked away, scene closed, no applause needed. The next morning, Riley laid the engagement ring on the marble counter of Adam's kitchen. No note. No explanation. Just the ring. And a sheet of paper beneath it. Blank. He would know what it meant. That the story had ended. That there would be no rewrite, no sequel, no carefully crafted apology to reel her back in. Riley didn't need closure from him. She had already written her own. Camille left the city in late spring. Brooklyn had become too tight, too familiar. She said goodbye through a short message, no sentiment, no regret. Just a kind of respectful silence. A shared knowing. They weren't friends. They didn't need to be. What they had wasn't built for friendship. It was built for truth. Riley kept working. Finished the pilot she'd been producing. Said yes to dinners. Took long walks without her phone. Her life didn't become suddenly better. It just became hers again. She passed by the cafe one afternoon, the one where the photo had been taken. Where everything had cracked. Where someone she didn't know had shown her exactly who she was loving. The table was empty. The chair where Adam once sat was now filled by a man reading alone. She watched for a moment, then moved on. Later that week, she found herself scrolling her archive folder. The photo was still there. Adam and Camille. That easy laugh. That borrowed touch. But this time, she didn't flinch. She zoomed in on herself in the reflection of the cafe window. Just barely visible. Standing a few feet away. Framed by shadow. Unmoving. She hadn't noticed herself before. She had been in the image the whole time. Watching. Waiting. Now, she saved the photo under a new name. Witness. And she closed the folder. Not with a slam. But with precision. Quietly. Deliberately. The way all endings should be. She didn't throw the ring. She didn't ask for answers. She left a blank page. Because she'd already filled her story elsewhere. But in our next story, a woman from Hell's Kitchen wins the man. She gets the keys, the bed, the title. And then, she finds out why the ex never tried to take him back. Because sometimes, the prize at the end of the affair is just the problem in prettier packaging. Stay with us for the next chapter in 10 True Affair Stories from New York. Because not every other woman wants to stay the woman he comes home to. She got the man. She got the keys. She got the bed. And the morning coffee. But she also got the silence. The vanishing hours. The questions that never had answers. And then, she found the notebook. Not hers. Not new. Just familiar. Isabel from Hell's Kitchen, I won the man. Then I found out why she let him go. Series, 10 True Affair Stories from New York. The first night Isabel moved in, the apartment felt like a movie set. Soft jazz played from the vintage speaker Nathan loved to brag about. Candles flickered in curate corners. On the bathroom mirror, scrawled in his all-caps handwriting with a dry erase marker, "Welcome home." Her suitcase leaned unopened by the bedroom door, and still, she felt like she'd already been there for months. Nathan made it easy. He'd cleared drawers. Bought her oat milk. Switched the soap in the shower to the brand she preferred. For a moment, it felt like the beginning of something extraordinary. They ordered Thai food. Ate in bed. Fell asleep tangled in limbs and silence. For a while, it was sweet. He kissed her shoulder in the mornings. Called her baby without irony. Left voice notes when he had late meetings. The kind of love that came with playlists. But a few weeks later, the edges started to dull. It began with small things. A drawer that once held her hair ties now held receipts and an old key she'd never seen before. Her shampoo replaced with a brand she didn't use. Nathan began coming home without calling. Started saying "I thought I told you" when she asked about dinner plans or missed messages. He didn't yell. He didn't cheat. Not as far as she could prove. He just drifted. And when she reached for him he wasn't cold. He was hollow. The warmth stayed in the room, but not in his eyes. Isabel tried not to overthink it. She blamed her schedule, the weather, even the furniture. She bought flowers, rearranged the couch, told herself transitions were always strange. But it wasn't the place. It was the rhythm. Nathan stopped answering questions with full sentences. When she asked, "Where are you going tonight?" he'd say, "Out." When she asked, "What are we doing this weekend?" he'd shrug, "Whatever." He started turning his phone face down on the table. Started sleeping with his back to her. Once, when she asked if everything was okay, he looked at her like she'd asked if the sky was still blue. "You're imagining things," he said. She nodded. Apologized. Told herself maybe she was. Isabel wasn't used to winning. She'd been the other woman, the girl in the wing, the whispered name in late-night texts. But Nathan had chosen her. Moved her in. Said, "I want to build with you." So why did it now feel like she was being slowly erased? She began to wake earlier. Made his coffee. Tied her hair the way he liked. Laughed at jokes that weren't funny just to fill the silence. But the silence grew anyway. One night, she made dinner his favorite. Pasta with lemon cream and thyme. She waited. Set the table. Lit candles. He came home at 11:14. No explanation. He ate a slice of cold bread. Said, "You didn't have to wait." She smiled. Said nothing. And then she cried in the shower. Quietly. Because the tiles didn't ask questions. That night, as Nathan slept, Isabel stared at the ceiling. Counted the turns in the ceiling fan. Thought about Eliza, the girl who'd left without fighting. The one Isabel had once considered weak. But now, lying next to Nathan's silence, she wondered if Eliza had seen this version of him too. If she hadn't lost. If she'd just left first. She wasn't looking for it. She had been reorganizing the living room, trying to make the space feel more hers. New throw pillows, a rug with color, something to break up the gray. Nathan was out again. Unexplained. Again. The notebook was wedged behind the radiator, barely visible, its cover warped slightly from heat and dust. At first she thought it might have been his, or old receipts, maybe even a sketchpad. But when she opened it, the first page said, in looping black ink, "Eliza K." She froze. The same Eliza. The one who had quietly disappeared. The one Nathan never spoke of unless prompted, and even then, only in phrases like "she wasn't happy" or "it just ran its course." Isabel turned the page. March 3rd, didn't come home until 2 a.m. No explanation. Turned off phone. March 7th, told me I was too emotional. Went silent for 36 hours. March 12th, found texts to someone labeled M. He said I was invading his space. Each entry was dated, brief, methodical. Not angry. Not tearful. Just logged. A record. As Isabel flipped through, the patterns began to hum in her chest. April 2nd, we argued. He left for a walk, came back at midnight. Smelled like her perfume. April 6th, he said he needed space, then left me waiting at dinner for over an hour. April 10th, he told me I make him feel like the bad guy when I ask questions. Isabel sat down on the floor. The hardwood felt too cold through her leggings. She turned back to her calendar. Checked her messages. Her call logs. She was living the same timeline. The missed calls. The 36-hour silences. The same cold phrases, recycled. You're too sensitive. You don't trust me? Why do you always make things dramatic? Eliza had been here. Not metaphorically. Literally. In this room. With these walls. And Nathan had rehearsed the same script. Isabel closed the notebook. Held it against her chest for a second, then opened it again. Began writing her own notes in the margins. June 14th, he left after a joke I made. Didn't return texts. Showed up 9 hours later with no explanation. June 18th, he said I needed to learn not to question everything. Then deleted his browser history. June 19th, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the way I was sitting. Shoulders curled forward. Eyes blank. It wasn't rage. It wasn't heartbreak. It was recognition. She wasn't becoming Eliza. She had already become her. And now the question wasn't, does he love me? It was, why did I ever think I was different? She waited until he came home. It was past 10, and the Thai takeout had already gone cold on the counter. Nathan walked in without urgency, tossing his keys in a bowl, pulling off his jacket as if everything was normal. Isabel stood in the hallway. We need to talk, she said. He didn't flinch. Just sighed. About what now? She showed him the notebook. Didn't say a word, just held it out. He didn't take it. You went through my stuff, he said. It's not yours, she replied quietly. It's Eliza's. It was behind the radiator. Nathan looked at the notebook like it was ticking. He scoffed. That's old. Ancient history. What are you doing, Isabel? She looked at him. Really looked. I'm asking if you see the pattern. You're being paranoid. You've been off lately. Emotional. Unstable. You read something and twist it into a conspiracy. She felt her stomach twist, but she nodded. Right. Emotional. That's what she wrote, too. He shook his head and walked past her. I can't do this every night. You haven't done anything for 2 nights, she said. But he was already in the bedroom. The next morning, he was gone before she woke. No note. No text. Just silence. It lasted 2 days. 2 full days of nothing. Isabel didn't cry. She cleaned. She made lists. She stopped checking her phone. She opened the notebook again. Reread everything. On the 3rd morning, she pulled out a storage bin from under the bed, one Nathan never used. At the bottom, buried beneath a winter scarf and a broken umbrella, was a coat. Not hers. It was pale green, soft wool. She remembered seeing it once, draped on a hanger in old photos of Eliza. Without thinking, Isabel put it on. It was too big in the shoulders, slightly frayed at the cuffs, smelled faintly like rosemary and soap. She sat down in front of the mirror. The same mirror where Nathan had once written "Welcome Home." Now it was blank. She studied herself. The coat didn't make her someone else. But the eyes in the reflection, they weren't hers. There was exhaustion in them. A dimness. The edge of apology for simply existing. She adjusted the collar. The mirror watched. And for the first time, Isabel didn't see a woman who had one. She saw someone disappearing by inches. Not from betrayal of the body, but from erosion of the mind. She whispered, "Stop," though there was no one in the room. Then, louder, "Stop." The echo didn't answer. But something in her did. She stood. Took off the coat. Folded it. Placed it by the door. She didn't know where she would go yet. But she knew where she wouldn't stay. She typed the message slowly, deliberately. No greeting. No apology. "I found it." She stared at it for a long moment before pressing send. The reply came 5 minutes later. "Then leave before he makes you forget who you were?" That was all. No name. No punctuation. Just truth. Isabel didn't cry. She didn't feel rage or sorrow. Only clarity, clean and quiet, like the final note of a song you hadn't realized was ending. She packed while Nathan was gone. He hadn't said where he was going. She hadn't asked. The apartment was still, the kind of stillness that comes after you've stopped trying to be heard. She didn't take the framed photos. Didn't take the jacket he bought her in Rome or the bracelet he gave her on their second month. She took her clothes, her notebooks, and the Eliza journal. She didn't leave a note. The silence was already loud enough. She placed the key on the kitchen table, next to the empty takeout containers and the unopened bottle of wine they were supposed to drink weeks ago. She didn't look back. Not when the door clicked shut. Not when her footsteps echoed down the hallway. Outside, the wind was sharp. The sky hung low, heavy with unshed rain. She walked slowly through Hell's Kitchen, the streets humming with their usual mix of heat, horns, and unsaid things. She stopped at an intersection. The light was red, but no cars came. Neon signs blinked across her skin. The city looked different now, less cinematic, more real. She held the notebook in one hand, clutched against her side like a map. Her other hand was empty, but steady. When the light turned green, she didn't rush. She crossed. Not toward someone. Not away from something. Just forward. And that was enough. She didn't shout. She didn't wait for him to come home. She didn't even pack everything. She just found what the last woman left behind. And realized. He hadn't changed. Only the name did. But in our final story, a woman from Harlem doesn't walk away. She doesn't cry. She doesn't burn the bridge. She stays. Not because she forgave him, but because she has one more move. And this time, he's not the only one keeping secrets. Stay with us for the final chapter of 10 True Affair Stories from New York. Because some endings are better delivered slowly. She knew. She saw the receipts. The girl. The lie. The loan under her name. But she didn't pack. She didn't scream. She didn't leave. She stayed. Not because she loved him. Because he made a mistake. And now, she had the proof. Maren from Harlem, I found out. I stayed. But not for him. Series, 10 True Affair Stories from New York. It started with a number that didn't make sense. Maren was reviewing the monthly breakdown of their shared account, a routine she never skipped. Not because she didn't trust him, but because numbers had never lied to her. People did. $6,500. Marked as a transfer. Labeled vaguely, Project Seed. She hadn't authorized it. She cross-checked the date. A Tuesday. She was in Philadelphia that day for a nonprofit board meeting. Darius had said he was working from home, prepping grant proposals for his upcoming play. But the money was gone. She called the bank. Asked for the receiving account number. Then the name. It came back under her own. Only it wasn't an account she recognized. Maren sat back in her chair. Closed the laptop. Reopened it. She logged into her old inbox, the one she used before they moved in together. Started searching keywords, loan, signature, theater fund. That's when she found it. A PDF contract. Darius's project had applied for an emergency arts grant tied to a private investor. But to secure it, a co-signer was required. A name with better credit. A name that held weight. Hers. At the bottom of the page, beneath a stack of legal phrasing and risk clauses, was a digital signature. Maren Jefferson. Only, she hadn't signed it. She double-checked the IP log. The form had been submitted from their apartment Wi-Fi. Late at night. 3 weeks ago. She had been asleep. He had been up working. The silence in the apartment was different now. Not peaceful. Pressurized. She printed the contract. 1 copy. Then 2. She scanned it. Uploaded it to a hidden folder in her cloud drive. Forwarded it to her private email. Labeled it. In case. She didn't confront him. That night, she made dinner. Lentil stew. His favorite. They talked about the weather. About his rehearsals. About a new cafe that opened 2 blocks down. He smiled like always. Kissed her neck in that practiced way. And she smiled back. Like a woman who knew she was being robbed by the man sitting across from her and wasn't done collecting evidence. She waited until he fell asleep, soft breathing beside her. Then she got up. Opened her laptop again. She built a spreadsheet. Transfer dates. Project timelines. Rental payments. His travel receipts. Her credit activity. There was a map now. And it pointed to only one conclusion. She had been funding the illusion. He wasn't building a life with her. He was financing one through her. Maren didn't cry. She didn't call her best friend. She didn't pour wine or throw anything against the wall. She just looked at the printout again. Her name. His ambition. Her risk. His gamble. She knew the game now. And it was her move next. The girl's name was Talia. Marin found her by accident. Or maybe it wasn't an accident. Algorithms were predictable, and Darius had a habit of being careless when he felt untouchable. An Instagram story, just 10 seconds. Darius's laugh, unmistakable. A hand brushing his. A soft light, a rooftop bar. The camera turned just enough to catch his profile. Talia tagged the location. Marin didn't react. She saved the post. Then searched. Talia Grace. 27. Aspiring actress. Shared two mutuals both connected to a community theater group Darius had once performed with. Marin scrolled through her photos. Headshots. Candid rehearsal pics. A recent birthday dinner with a caption that read, "Thank you to the man who believes in me more than anyone ever has. My mentor. My anchor. My unexpected heart." She didn't tag him. Of course she didn't. Marin booked a table at a quiet cafe on the Upper West Side. Then she sent a message through a burner profile. "Hi. I work with Darius on a few artistic accounts. Would love to connect upcoming projects. Coffee." Talia replied in under an hour. She wore a powder blue dress. Soft makeup. Nervous energy. Marin arrived early. Dark blazer. Neutral lip. Her presence deliberate, composed. She didn't introduce herself as a partner. Or a co-signer. Just someone in the loop. Talia talked easily. She was eager. Kind. Unaware. She mentioned Darius's brilliance. His charisma. His eye for people. Marin listened. Asked smart, gentle questions. And then Talia said it. "He told me about the woman who helps manage his finances. His longtime collaborator. I think she used to work on grant compliance. You must know her." "Marin, I think." Marin didn't blink. She nodded once. "I've heard of her." Talia smiled. "He says she's the reason he can finally focus on art." Marin sipped her coffee. Bit the inside of her cheek. "He's very lucky," she said. The rest of the conversation passed like steam. Soft. Fleeting. But Marin left the cafe with every piece she needed. Darius wasn't in love. Not with Talia. Not even with her. He was in love with reflection of being seen as someone worth betting on. Talia gave him innocence. Marin gave him access. Neither was accidental. She took the long way home. Walked past the theater where Darius once played Othello. The poster was gone now. A new face in a glass. She paused. Looked at her reflection. Not jealous. Not hurt. Just tired. And done pretending the performance was still ongoing. It had ended. He just didn't know it yet. Marin sat in the quiet of her home office, the only light coming from her laptop screen. The apartment was still too still. Darius was out, again, chasing opportunity or distraction. She didn't care which anymore. She opened her old email. Searched for the contract. There it was. Subject, final signature, grant agreement. She clicked. The PDF opened. There was her name. There was her signature. There was the forged lie that tied her to someone else's risk. She downloaded the file. Scanned every page. Every clause. The loan was steep. The penalties worse. But what made her pulse skip wasn't the numbers. It was the precision of the lie. Darius hadn't rushed this. He'd planned. Calculated. She printed 2 copies. Scanned them back in high resolution. She saved 1 copy in a hidden folder on her encrypted cloud drive. Another on an external hard drive she hadn't used in years. She emailed herself. She emailed her lawyer. Subject line, for records only. Attachment, leverage.pdf. She didn't include a message. She didn't need to. Then she closed the laptop. Took a deep breath. And waited. When Darius came home hours later, the smell of whiskey followed him in. His scarf was askew. His smile lazy. "Hey, baby," he said, leaning to kiss her cheek. She let him. Dinner was cold. She had left it out intentionally. He didn't ask questions. Later, he poured himself a drink and collapsed on the couch. He played a jazz playlist on low volume, the kind he always turned to when he wanted to feel profound. Maren stood in the doorway. She watched him sip, watched him settle. Then, softly, almost like it was nothing, she said, "You won't lose me tonight. But if I lose anything else because of you, you'll lose everything." Darius turned, slow and foggy. What? She didn't repeat herself. She just met his eyes. And held them. Something in him shifted. He laughed. Lightly. Like she was joking. "Babe. Come on. You know I got you." She tilted her head. "I do. That's why I checked." He opened his mouth. Closed it. She walked away first. No slam. No fight. Just one line, dropped like a stone into the middle of their fabricated stillness. And now, he knew. She wasn't guessing anymore. She was documenting. The next morning, Maren woke first. She brewed coffee. Reset every password. Logged out of every shared account. Called the bank and removed his name from the joint savings. Froze the credit card he used for expenses. Reissued a new one. By 9:12 a.m., she had changed the locks. Not to keep him out, but to remind herself, nothing stays open for someone who lies to get in. Darius didn't ask questions. Not that morning. Not the next. He walked more carefully. Said fewer words. Maren didn't perform. She didn't pretend to care about dinner plans or his grand proposals. She didn't offer softness where steel was required. She took a call with her attorney midweek. Asked what would happen if the loan defaulted. Asked what would happen if she pressed charges. She didn't threaten. She just wanted to know the law's limits. She reviewed the apartment lease. Saw her name first. Noted it. She began rewriting everything he thought was shared. The accounts. The apartment. The narrative. By Friday, Darius brought her flowers. She thanked him. Set them in water. Then threw them out when he left. That weekend, Maren visited the same cafe where she'd first met Talia. This time, she sat outside. Alone. Iced tea, no lemon. A book she didn't open. Across the street, she saw him. Darius. Laughing, animated. Talia beside him, nodding, hopeful. Maren watched without blinking. She didn't wave. Didn't flinch. In her bag sat a black hard drive. Not to expose him. To remember. Because memory is a weapon when silence has to speak. When they stood to leave, Maren waited. Then rose. Walked in the opposite direction. No drama. No confrontation. Just a quiet withdrawal of resources, emotional, financial, spiritual. She didn't need to leave the city. She didn't need to delete his number. She had already removed him from the place he'd used most effectively. Her trust. And now, the terms were hers. Not for revenge. For balance. For memory. For control. And maybe, most of all, for peace. Some affairs end in tears. Some in lawsuits. And some like Maren's end in silence. With a woman holding the evidence. And the upper hand. That was the final chapter in 10 True Affair Stories from New York. But betrayal isn't a New York thing. It's an everywhere thing. For our next series, we're heading south. To the state where sweet tea hides bitter truths. Where hospitality can't mask infidelity. And where cheating isn't just personal. It's generational. Welcome to Georgia. 10 True Affair Stories from Georgia is coming next. Because sometimes, the quiet towns hold the loudest secrets.